The evening resembled a perfect picture of family happiness. Victoria stood by the stove, preparing her signature seafood pasta, James' favorite dish. From the other room, the voices of Emily and Daniel could be heard. The house was filled with an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. James returned home later than usual, but, as always, brought with him that same energy that instantly filled the home with life. His confident step, sincere smile, and habit of kissing everyone. These were all part of their daily routine. Victoria smiled at him, but there was something subtly different in her gaze. She tried to hide it, continuing to smile and joke. But something had changed. "You look tired today," she noted, pouring tea. "Tough day," James admitted, rubbing his temples. "But with you, all my fatigue disappears." James was always so sincere, so caring. It started to irritate her. More and more often, she caught herself thinking that his predictability had become mundane for her. A voice inside her head grew louder, whispering that life should be more exciting, more vibrant. That voice had first appeared after a chance encounter with William, James' complete opposite. He knew how to be the center of attention. When he and Victoria met at a party, something clicked inside her. They talked about books, films, and even life. And with each passing minute, Victoria realized how much she had missed such conversations. Now, her thoughts frequently returned to that moment. She found herself longing for more. She knew she was crossing a line, but the risk was exhilarating. "I'm just tired," she lied. These words became her salvation every time guilt began to gnaw at her. She found justification, telling herself it was just harmless flirting, that it meant nothing. But deep down, Victoria understood. She had already taken the first step toward the abyss. James decided to surprise the whole family, arranged for a half-day off to pick up the kids from school and take them on a picnic. For him, it wasn't just an idea. It was an attempt to spend time with his family, to show them how much they meant to him. "Victoria, we have plans today." He said mysteriously in the morning, kissing her goodbye. Her heart clenched with anxiety. What if James suspected something? But she quickly dismissed the thought. No, James was too trusting. At the picnic, he taught the children how to fish, telling stories of his adventures with friends from his youth. Victoria sat apart, watching them. For a moment, she felt a wave of tenderness. She looked at James and saw a man who gave his whole self to his family. But the moment was fleeting. William had sent her a message. Instinctively, she hid her phone before James could notice. The weight of her secrets grew heavier with each passing day. She was getting more entangled, and it was becoming harder to hide. William's messages were short but daring, making her heart race. Just seeing a notification from him sent a rush of adrenaline through her veins. "Victoria, you seem distracted today," remarked her friend Eleanor, William's wife, during a walk in the park. "Just a lot on my mind." Victoria brushed it off, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Eleanor was always observant, and sometimes Victoria felt like she might suspect something. But convincing herself otherwise was easier. William, on the other hand, was confident, certain of his influence over her. Their encounters were spontaneous. Coffee during lunch breaks, casual meetings on city streets. Every time, he found an excuse to touch her hand, to cast a knowing glance. Victoria was like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing she would get burned but unable to stop. One evening, when James had left for a business meeting, William suggested coming over. "This is madness," she whispered into the phone. "But isn't that what you need?" he replied, his smirk almost audible through the line. When he arrived at her doorstep, Victoria was on the verge of panic. Children were already asleep, and the house felt eerily quiet. William entered confidently, as if he belonged there. His presence was both a thrill and a torment. "You're too tense," he noted, stepping closer. "Relax. I just wanted to see you." Their conversation continued over a glass of wine. William had a way with words, making Victoria feel desired. "Nay, Victoria, special." It was the complete opposite of her routine life with James, where every day felt predictable. The next morning led back to routine, as if nothing had happened. But Victoria's actions became more cautious. Her phone was always placed face down. Passwords changed more frequently than before. James noticed nothing. He was too consumed with preparations for an important project. However, Eleanor became more probing with her questions. "Is everything okay with you and James?" she asked over coffee one day. "Of course." "Why do you ask?" Victoria tried to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her unease. "You've changed lately," Eleanor observed. "Maybe it's just my imagination. But be careful. Sometimes it feels like you're playing with fire." Her words pierced through Victoria, but she brushed them off. Eleanor knew nothing, or so Victoria convinced herself. Later, Victoria sent the children to their grandmother and decided to meet with William in a neutral place. They chose a cozy cafe outside the city, somewhere no one would recognize them. As they talked, Victoria felt her fear giving way to a sense of freedom. "You're changing," William remarked, watching her. "Is that bad?" "On the contrary. You're finally starting to live for yourself." His words hit her deeply. Had she really never lived for herself before? Meanwhile, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Late returns home. Strange phone calls. It didn't fit into the familiar picture of their marriage. She decided to install a hidden camera in their living room, hoping to confirm her suspicions. For the first few days, the recordings seemed pointless. William, as always, watched TV, talked to her, or simply fell asleep on the couch. But one recording immediately caught her attention. His tone was too soft, too intimate. "You look so beautiful today," he said with a smile. Eleanor froze, her heart pounding. "Say it again." "Tell me how much you missed me," he continued, and from his voice it became clear he wasn't talking to her. That was enough. Eleanor didn't need to watch anymore. She already knew the truth. Her mind raced, searching for a way out. Eleanor was not a woman who would simply accept this. She decided to fight, but first, she needed to know everything. Meanwhile, Victoria was struggling to maintain her double life. Hiding her betrayal was becoming more and more difficult. William demanded more and more of her time, and James was starting to notice something was off. "Why are you hiding something?" he asked one evening when they were alone at dinner. You're imagining things. Victoria tried to laugh, but her voice trembled. James looked at her for a long moment, but said nothing. A growing sense of unease settled in his chest, but he didn't want to believe the worst. To Himley had always been an unbreakable foundation, and the thought that Victoria could betray him seemed unthinkable. Eleanor decided to take action. She meticulously reviewed the recordings, searching for proof that would reveal who William was seeing. A few days later, her patience was rewarded. A name flashed across his phone screen. During a recording. Victoria. So that's how it is, she whispered, feeling rage swell inside her. She didn't confront him immediately. Instead, she gathered more evidence. She waited until William left for another meeting with Victoria, then secretly followed him. The car stopped at a cafe outside the city where the pair spent hours together. Eleanor took photos, capturing them together. Victoria felt the situation slipping out of control. She was becoming anxious, constantly looking over her shoulder, fearing they would be caught. William, on the other hand, seemed relaxed, almost careless. His confidence reassured her, but not for long. "We're taking too many risks," she told him when they met in his car. "Risk is what makes life exciting," he replied with a smile. The words sounded romantic, but deep down, Victoria felt the weight of her secret growing heavier. One evening, when William returned home, she confronted him, throwing the photographs and call records onto the table. William went pale, realizing his deception had been exposed. Eleanor didn't scream or cry, but her words cut like knives. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed all of them. James, Emily, Daniel. Do you even understand what you've done?" William tried to justify himself, but Eleanor just stared at him silently until he fell quiet. Then she picked up the envelope with the photographs.
"What are you going to do?"
he asked, nearly shouting. "I'm going to do what's right," she replied, slamming the door behind her. Eleanor sent the envelope to James at his workplace. Inside were the photos and a letter in which she described everything she had learned. Stared at the pictures for a long time, as if refusing to believe his own eyes. It felt like a nightmare. He didn't say a word to Victoria. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. Victoria felt her throat tighten, but she couldn't force herself to speak. In that moment, something between them shattered completely. Victoria sat in the kitchen, mindlessly stirring her now cold tea. Familiar sounds of the TV and James' footsteps. 2 days had passed since he had left without saying a word. He didn't answer calls or messages, leaving her in torturous uncertainty. The children noticed the changes too. Emily, a teenager too, with a sharp sense of justice, looked at her mother with clear confusion. "Mom, where's Dad?" she asked one evening over dinner. "He's at work," Victoria lied, trying to avoid the conversation. But Emily wasn't a child anymore. She could sense when something was wrong. Meanwhile, James had gone to stay with his old army friend Christopher. The house, surrounded by forest, was the perfect place to clear his mind. Christopher didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just listened and handed him a glass. "You know what you have to do," he said after James finished telling his story. I don't know yet, James admitted. He didn't feel anger or pain anymore. Just emptiness. He tried to understand when things had gone so wrong. He couldn't shake the image. He tried to image Dawn so wrong. He couldn't shake the image of Victoria and William, their smiles, their touches. The feeling was like poison, slowly spreading through his veins. Left alone with the children, Victoria began to realize she was losing control. Her attempts to reach James became more desperate. William, on the other hand, was also struggling. Eleanor had left him, leaving behind only a short note. Your freedom means more to you than your family. We need to talk, he texted. Now is not the time, she responded, feeling that every conversation only made things worse. There were dozens of missed calls from Victoria, a few messages from her parents, and one from Eleanor. A short, I filed for divorce. If you need anything, let me know. That message made James think. He knew Eleanor was right. This wasn't something he could just accept. One evening, as Victoria was trying to put Daniel to sleep, she received a call from James' mother. Her voice was strict and cold. Victoria, can you explain what's going on? James has left. The kids are confused. What have you done? Victoria tried to explain, but the words got stuck in her throat. She could feel suspicion growing around her, even though no one knew for sure. The unspoken pressure weighed down on her like an avalanche. James spent several more days at Christopher's house, thinking about what to do next. He wanted to start a new life, but knew he had to close this chapter first. You don't owe anyone an explanation, Christopher told him one evening, but you should live in a way you want. Regret later. Those words struck a nerve. James realized he had a choice. Either he could keep torturing himself with thoughts of the past, or he could leave it behind once and for all. Meanwhile, William's life was falling apart. After Eleanor left, his apartment became a cold, empty space where every reminder of his past life hurt. Work became harder too. His colleagues, learning about his affair, began treating him with disgust. William had always prided himself on his help, charisma, but now even those who once respected him turned away. This is your own fault? His boss snapped after yet another complaint about his behavior. We build careers here, not destroy families. That was the last straw. William lost his job. Victoria, on the other hand, was trying to find a way to win James back. Her attempts to call him were unsuccessful. She sent messages apologizing, begging him to return, but James never replied. Mom, stop humiliating yourself, Emily finally told her one day, watching her desperate attempts. Dad is better off without you. Those words hurt Victoria more than she could have imagined. Her own daughter, whom she had raised now, looked at her with contempt. James, still staying with Christopher, focused on work. An old friend from another city offered him a managerial position at a construction company. It was a chance to start fresh, leaving behind all the pain and betrayal. Before leaving, James decided to visit his parents. They lived near Christopher's house, and the visit felt like closing another chapter of his past. Son, you did the right thing by leaving, his mother said, hugging him. You deserve to be happy. But the kids... James hesitated, They will grow up. His father said, "What matters is that they see you living with dignity." Those words helped James make his final decision. Victoria, sinking deeper into guilt, also felt William drifting away. One day, he came to her house. "You're avoiding me," he said, standing at her doorstep. "It's over," Victoria replied, not letting him inside. "Go away." William tried to convince her they could still be together. But Victoria was firm. She realized that everything with William. Meanwhile, Eleanor had already filed for divorce. She wasn't interested in reconciliation. She simply wanted to cut ties with William completely. "I'm stronger than you thought," she told him when they met in court. "I will never let you destroy my life again." William tried to win her back, but he knew she was already gone. James arrived in his new city late in the evening. The cold air greeted him at the station, reminding him of home. The city seemed quiet and peaceful, perfect for starting over. His old friend Richard, who had offered him the job, was waiting for him. "You finally made it," Richard grinned, pulling James into a hug. "There's a lot of work ahead, but trust me, this is the best thing that could have happened to you." The next day, James started his new job. The construction company Richard managed was expanding, and James took on a key role. He dove into projects, business trips, and negotiations. It was exactly what he needed. Constant work that left no time for memories of the past. At first, his colleagues were wary of him. James was reserved and never talked about himself. But over time, they saw his professionalism and quiet confidence. "A boss like him is a dream," they whispered in the hallways. Meanwhile, Victoria, left alone, struggled with the silence that filled their once lively home. The children distanced themselves from her. Emily spent more time at her grandmother's house, and Daniel preferred to stay in his room, avoiding conversation. "Let's have dinner together," Victoria suggested one evening. "For what?" Emily snapped. "It won't change anything." The pain was sharper than she expected. Victoria realized she was losing the most precious thing she had left, her children. Months passed. James fully adapted to his new life. He bought a small apartment in the city center, started jogging in the mornings, and even joined a local table tennis club. His life was finally finding balance. One day, at a cafe, he met a woman named Olivia. She was a doctor and often stopped by the cafe for lunch. Their conversation started casually. They happened to order the same dish. "Looks like we have the same taste." She smiled. For the first time in a long time, James felt comfortable in someone's presence. And serenity soothed him. Victoria, seeing her children drifting further away, realized she had one last chance to regain their trust. She went to visit James' parents. "I know I made mistakes," she admitted to his mother. "I want a chance." James' mother looked at her for a long moment. "A chance," she repeated. "You want us to convince them to return to you? That's not up to us. You destroyed this family. Only you can fix it. Those words made Victoria realize that the only way forward was to have an honest conversation with Emily and Daniel. But was it already too late? James and Olivia started seeing each other more often. She wasn't just an interesting conversation partner. She was someone who understood him without unnecessary words. They took walks around the city, discussed films, books, and their plans for the future. "You don't seem like someone who has always lived a peaceful life," she remarked one day. "That's true," James admitted. "But I hope things will be different now." And for the first time in a long time, he truly believed it. Half a year had passed. Each new day was a test for Victoria. She lived in a house that was once filled with laughter and the noise of children. Now, the silence was unbearable. Daniel rarely left his room, and Emily had completely stopped talking to her. Victoria couldn't bring herself to look at the family photos still hanging on the walls. The images of a smiling James and the children tormented her soul. She knew she could never bring back the life she had lost. One day, she decided to visit Emily, who was living with her grandmother. She asked hesitantly when her daughter opened the door. "If this is another apology, I've heard it all before," Emily said coldly. Victoria tried to explain her feelings, to tell her how difficult it was without her family. But every word only bounced off her daughter's hardened heart. "You betrayed us. You betrayed Dad," Emily said, looking at her mother with judgment. "I can't forget that." Her words felt like a sentence. Victoria left, feeling completely helpless. Meanwhile, James continued to build his new life. His relationship with Olivia grew stronger. They started spending weekends together, going on nature trips, and having quiet dinners in cozy restaurants. Her warmth and support helped James heal. One evening, she invited him over for dinner. Her small apartment was neat and filled with warmth. Paintings she had painted herself hung on the walls, and the table was set with freshly baked bread. "You think too much about the past," she said, pouring him a cup of hot tea. "And how do you get rid of it?" he asked, looking at her. "You don't," she replied. "You make peace with it and move forward." Her words touched something deep inside him. For the first time in years, he felt that he could truly let go of the pain and start living again. William, left without work and family, had completely fallen apart. He moved into a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the city, living alone. His phone remained silent, and his attempts to reach Victoria or Eleanor were unsuccessful. One day, he ran into Victoria at the supermarket. "Victoria." "Wait," he called, hurrying toward her. She turned sharply, irritation flashing across her face. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "Just to talk. Maybe we could try again." Her eyes burned with anger. "Again, I lost everything. Because of you." "You really think I'd go back to that?" William tried to say something, but she wasn't listening. She left her groceries and walked out of the store, her chest heaving with suppressed rage and pain. Meanwhile, James' children were also adapting to their new reality. Emily, now living with her grandmother, started volunteering. Her kindness and sense of responsibility helped her connect with others. Daniel, though still withdrawn, began showing interest in football and joined a local team. One day, Emily wrote James a letter. "I miss you. I want us to meet." When James received it, he realized that his children still needed him. He immediately started planning a visit to see them. He stood by the window holding the letter in his hands. His daughter, who had always been so strong and independent, was now reaching out to him. He felt proud of her, but also regretted not being there for her when she needed him the most. "You're nervous?" Olivia said, standing next to him. "Yeah," he admitted shortly. "They've been through a lot," she said gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "But you're doing everything you can, and that's what matters." The trip to see his children was not just about reconnecting with them. It was also a test for his own heart. He knew that talking to Emily and Daniel wouldn't be easy. But he had to show them that despite everything, he was still their father. When he arrived at his parents' house, they greeted him with warm embraces. "You look good," his mother said, handing him a cup of tea. "We've missed you." The children arrived a little later. Daniel was cautious, but Emily immediately ran to James, hugging him tightly, as if afraid to lose him again. "I missed you so much," she whispered. Those words were the most valuable gift he could have received. Meanwhile, Victoria sat alone in her empty house, knowing that James had gone to see the children. The realization tormented her. She was no longer part of their lives, but knowing it only made the pain worse. She tried to distract herself, reading books, watching films, even trying embroidery. But nothing filled the void inside her. The only comfort she had was her journal, where she poured out her thoughts. "Today, I saw their photos again. Emily looks so grown up. I wonder if she ever thinks about me." Emily and Daniel spent the whole day with James. They walked in the park, rode bicycles, and talked about their future. "Dad, are you happy now?" Daniel suddenly asked. "I think so," James replied, carefully choosing his words. "But I still miss the times when we were all together." The children exchanged glances, but things are different now. James realized that they had grown up more than he had expected. Victoria, on the other hand, was sinking deeper into loneliness. One night, she tried calling James, but his number was unreachable. He had moved on. He had Olivia, his new life, and his children. Turned off her phone, trying to block out the echoes of the past. James continued building his life with Olivia and maintaining a strong relationship with his children. Every call and letter from Emily or Daniel became a source of happiness. Emily shared her successes at school, while Daniel, though quieter, started opening up about his football achievements. "You're becoming better," Olivia remarked one day, watching James write a letter to Emily. Victoria, left alone, tried to piece her life back together. She got a job at a local library. It was a quiet place where she could escape her thoughts, but the emptiness inside her never disappeared. One day, she received an invitation to Emily's wedding. It was short and informal, but Victoria knew this was her chance to see her daughter again. Maybe this will be the beginning of something new, she thought, carefully placing the invitation in a drawer. On the wedding day, James arrived with Olivia. Felt slightly nervous. It was the first time he was bringing her back to his hometown. His mother immediately liked Olivia, noticing her warmth and gentleness. "You deserve to be happy," she told James as they shared tea. As guests started arriving, Victoria came in last. She had chosen a modest dress and seemed calm, but inside a storm raged. When Emily saw her, she hesitated for a moment before approaching. "Thank you for coming," she said coldly. The words felt like mere formality, but for Victoria, they were already an achievement. The ceremony was held in a small, flower-adorned church. Emily looked radiant, standing next to her confident young husband. James sat in the front row, feeling proud of his daughter. At the reception, Victoria was given a chance to speak. She raised her glass. "I wish you love," she said, looking at Emily. "Real, sincere love that you will always cherish." Emily nodded, but said nothing in return. At some nothing in return point, James and Victoria found themselves alone. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "It was important," she replied. "You raised them well." James looked at her for a long time. "They're still your children? But earning their children. Trust back is up to you." Those words made Victoria think. When the evening ended, James walked Olivia to the car. She smiled and hugged him. "This was a good day," she said. "You have a real family, James. For the first time in a long time." He felt like he had everything he had been searching for.